button so you can accept that on your side. I want to welcome everybody to the 1776 Syndicate. It's amazing. We've been doing this now, well, since January, and we've had a number of wonderful guests, elected officials from not only Montana, but Utah and California and across the country. So what a great body of work we have right now. If you're a member, don't forget you can go back in and watch these videos. They're all labeled so you can see our guests and what topics they had and what was important at the time. We're just coming out of primaries. I know so many of you worked very hard with that. So congratulations for the hard work, regardless if you were elected or not. Thank you for what you're doing. Just a couple of tableside manners on the Syndicate is we're going to record the call and it lives on our back end. So please don't record from your side. Also, be respectful of everybody's time and your questions and our guests. If there's any rude questions, you will be shut down, cut off, and thrown in the overflowing river right now. So typically do a couple little news updates. If you didn't hear, our governor just called for a state of emergency this morning due to the flooding down in Yellowstone. So our thoughts and prayers go out to the people down there. I know there's a lot of loss, a lot of concern. I just saw equally the sheriff here, Sheriff Hino in Flathead, issued a warning for people to basically stay home. You know, the floods and the rain that we're expecting and getting right now is nothing to mess around with. So our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody. All right. With that being said, a brief bio on my friend Elsie Arntzen, our Superintendent of Public Instruction. And, you know, last year, Mike Gell and I penned a letter on her behalf. And what's interesting is the purpose of the letter was in defense of what people were saying about her. And I've got to tell you, the day that I met Elsie in person on stage at the, I think it was the Trump, Reagan, Lincoln dinner fundraiser here in Flathead, she gave me her cell phone number. She says, you call me anytime you need me. And she meant that. And I've used it. I've texted, I've called, I've emailed her. I've used those contacts that she gave me. So for people to say that she's inaccessible and unwilling to be responsive is 100% wrong. And it's exactly why Mike and I penned that letter last year. Now, Elsie was elected in 2016 to a 4-year term. She's now serving her 2nd term. She's a 4th-generation Montanan from Billings. With her strong background in public education, she is honored to serve as superintendent for Montana's public schools, and it is her mission to put Montana students first at the Office of Public Instruction. And what I love about that statement, because this has probably been there for a little while, this is on the state website, is every bit of news that I see about Elsie that the left puts out is combating her position. And I just love her strength and her willingness to fight for our kids and our parents and the parental involvement in our schools. Who doesn't want that besides the left? So Elsie, I don't know if I could lay it up any better for you, but I'm thrilled to have you on and I want to thank you for your time. We've got a number of people that ran for school board on the call now, as well as I know some will be watching. So I'm going to give you the floor here for a little bit and hopefully we've got some questions for you.
Thank you. I very much appreciate it, Jim. And, you know, in Montana, and I think it should be anywhere, that your word is your bond. And I'm not afraid to have my compass be bright and shining exactly for putting our children first. And it's children and families. It was interesting because there was a memo that came out from Secretary Cardona, who is the lead of the Department of Education in DC. And he stole my punchline. He talked about, you know, that parents are the first teacher. If he firmly believed that, we wouldn't be where we are right now. And so I'm going to give him grace, and hopefully in the next remaining few months that he has with being Secretary of Ed, if there is not any other change in this next election that happens in 24, that he can really put legs on his statement. I'm not afraid. I try to, in my whole world, try to turn another cheek, try to make sure that I understand, that I give a little bit more grace and understanding. So when negative press comes out or negative, however it might be, it doesn't mean that I become a Pollyanna. It means, though, that I become emboldened with knowing that I'm doing the right thing. Putting our children first, as you said, Jim, is the right thing. And who could not believe that? Government is public schools. Public schools are government. To make sure that we serve our constituency means I need the best government. That's what my mission has been all along. As a representative and a state senator of our beautiful state of Montana, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about when to compromise and what to compromise on. I will not compromise on our children. I will not compromise on the ability of our families to be able to be their first teacher, be part of every discussion in our public schools. So I would be more than happy to answer any questions if I could. And if I can't get the answer right now, I'll get back.
Elsie, I don't normally throw out hardballs, but this just came up today. It was an email that I received. Middle school here in Kalispell, they had a field trip out to Heron Park where there's a pool and outdoor activities. And the teachers allowed an 8-year-old girl to run around topless. Actually, she wasn't 8. I'm sorry. She was in 5th grade, so older than 8, to run around topless because she identified as a transgender. And the teachers allowed that. And she was very developed to the point where a number of the parents that were there were complaining about that. And they wound up having to put on what they call pasties to cover the nipple portion. You know, I'm seeing this happen more often in terms of the acceptance of young kids identifying as transgender in the schools. And I don't think that there's a simple solution, but how would you propose that these schools start to address that? Because I know field trips have been canceled, or overnight, typical trips that the schools do, because they don't even want to deal with these transgender issues. Any thoughts on that?
Well, number one, I'm going to use the words common sense. Let's have common sense. So if you know that is going to happen, you have everybody wear a shirt, everybody. That means you don't parse it out with one or another, regardless if it's a swimming activity, an outdoor activity or not. One of the things that I have cautioned with is that I don't want the state of Montana to be at risk with any policies that I create or any information that flows from my office. I don't want our state taxpayers or our great state to be at risk. Government can't be at risk either in public school. It needs to have common sense understanding from the boardroom to the classroom. So you mentioned teachers. As a teacher, 5th grade teacher of 23 years, it saddens me that common sense can't be used to preempt the discussion that we're going to take now for probably 2 months in discussing what happened, who did it, why did it happen, and then disaggregate rights out. All children have rights by our Constitution, and there are policies in school boards that should protect those all rights. But if indeed we start segregating children out in different manners, whether it is by gender, whether it is by height, whether it is by anything at all in a disparity, you're going to run into a risk to a school for discrimination. So they should have had an all-in policy that would have been easy to preempt this. Now, should that be government or should that be common sense? I mean, I'm asking everybody, as a parent myself and a grandparent, what I heard was horrific, and I had not heard that today. And let me tell you, a lot of things reach my ears, and it's not all about the success in schools. I hear about the challenges rather than the wonderful things that I know that are occurring in schools. So gender is not in any of our health standards. I do not have anything dealing with heterosexual, homosexual, anything dealing with sex by any means in our health standards. So anything outside of that has a district at risk to say that they are now instituting policies or instituting any kind of a determination using any of those words. They are not protected by the state if they use those other words. And again, I'm going to come back to discrimination. By using that policy, if you just shared that with me today, that is discriminating against parents and other individuals that are feeling uncomfortable by being in a school setting, whether it is in a public school or whether it's a public school in a different setting. It's still called government school. Common sense, we need to get back to that.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry I threw a wing dinger at you, but it's been so important. Hey, Rod, you got a question? Go ahead.
I do. Thank you so much, Elsie. And the first thing I want to say is it's been a long time since I've been in the public education system myself. I did teach school for a while, but I was more involved. In fact, I was homeschooling my children before homeschooling was popular. So we were considered outliers, outsiders. And I didn't do it for any religious reasons or anything like that. I wanted the best for my kids, and I knew I could do better than what I saw in the public school system. So, you know, we tried it for a while, and my frustration though as a parent, and things may have changed since the 90s, but my frustration was I was a taxpayer, still am, and as you know, 30% of my tax bill always went to and still goes to public education, which I don't have a problem with. But as a homeschooling parent, I was getting nothing. You know, I could go to the school and they would give me textbooks for the appropriate grade level, but they typically weren't the type of curriculum I needed for my children. I taught them from where they were. So has that changed? And moving forward, especially now that there are more and more parents homeschooling, how can these taxpayers get the same value and still get the government to invest in all the children, even those who are homeschooled? That's a loaded question too.
It's not though, because if we put our Montana students first, if we put students first, does it matter where they learn? It should not matter at all. That portability of policy, that portability of dollar should be on the student, not on where the student is being taught. And we knew that the pandemic taught us a great amount of lessons. And if we don't encourage that reflection right now, then we haven't done justice to the system of public education, nor the system of just plain learning. Students, some of them learned very well in that remote world. Others did not. Some learned very well under the confines of bells and cells is what I call it. In other words, you got a time and a place that you're going to learn. And others struggled with that when they were thrust into this pandemic and not knowing what was going to happen. Some learned better at 8 o'clock at night and 10 o'clock at night than they did at 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning. It should be by the student and not by the grade or the bell or the cell or all of that. Our state's been moving toward proficiency learning, which means then that it is when the student learns and how the student learns. It's not about the specific timing of it. How this helps in homeschool then is if we can focus more on learning, focus more on the opportunity to learn. Then when there is a transference, and Rod, I think you might have said that, you know, you tried it. Did your children flow into public school at any time in their learning career?
Yes, on both ends. They started in public school, and one son was, you know, again, he was just all over the place. He probably would be labeled ADHD at this point, but he just wasn't engaged with the way they were teaching. And, you know, he learned fine at home because we engaged him using, you know, Cynthia Tobias, you know, the way they learn. That's kind of what we did. And then my oldest daughter was so far advanced, she would finish all of her lessons in minutes. And then she wanted to talk and chit chat. And so they labeled her as disruptive. You know, so by the time she was a freshman, she was doing collegiate, you know, coursework at home. So yeah, we started there. And then my youngest daughter wanted, you know, she had plenty of social, she danced all of her life, but she wanted to try public school. You know, just most of her dance friends went and she just wanted to try it for a semester. And she was appalled. She was appalled at the way teachers treated students. She was appalled at how students treated students and the teachers just ignored it. And that learning was almost secondary to just going through the paces. Mm-hmm. And so she went for a semester and said, this just is not for me. And she was well suited. She fit in. She fit in socially. She got her work done. She was a good student, but it was not for somebody who was intellectually and socially advanced. It didn't work. So yes, we were in the system on both ends.
So Rod, you've told a story that is probably in every single community across our state and in other states as well, because all kids are different. I mean, we are created so uniquely, and that's the purpose. That's the purpose. So to have the system of education be so rigid means we're failing kids. Just on a simple note, last year's statewide assessment, I had the math 34% C or better. 34% of our students in third grade through their junior year, 34% were C or better. Everybody else failed. Everybody else failed. Is our system failing? Yes. If we can't recognize, we must do different and we must do better. And it's not focused on a brick and mortar system. It's focused on who is at the table, the development of the individuals at that table. One of the things that I know that I'm working with right now is to remove grades and to put grade bands in, which would have helped your daughter, because we know students learn at different rates. The proficiency rate that is set by the federal government is not the same as what is set in your family or anyone else's family. So a grade band then would allow movement on both ways to help advance and also to help remediate, but always to move our children forward. Because by grades and by the hours spent in school right now, we are failing our children in Montana. And you have to look at this as some sort of a design, because if we are pushing hard at our state level, along with the governor's board of public ed, who has a quorum right now, we should be able to make progress within a year on how we are. But I have 20,000 teachers, and I don't know if those 20,000 teachers are going to be working toward this very same goal. But time is ticking. I have grandkids in school right now. One is entering into middle school. I'm frightened for her for all the reasons that we all are talking about right now, socially, as well as what might be happening in academics. We have to make change. The importance of our children is at hand right now. That's why I'm not giving up. That's why I answer all my phone calls. That's why I'm here with you tonight. We cannot fail. We cannot. We are adults. If adults fail, our children will follow. So let's be supportive. Let's be successful for the right reason. And that's our kids. Number one.
Elsie, I've got a question from Brian. And once you've answered that, I'm going to shift gears real quick to the election before we run out of time with you. But Brian, if you want to go ahead with your question.
Hi, Elsie. Thank you. I saw you at the Gallatin County Republican Women's Luncheon recently. Thank you for all that you've been doing. I've been paying attention. You've obviously come under a lot of flack recently. I personally think of a lot of it's just knee-jerk reaction. You know, as you know, and everybody else here may not know, I was recently elected as trustee in Belgrade. I have questions. You know, as you mentioned, not all children are created equal. I think over the years there's been a greater and greater push to get every kid into college. And, you know, let's face it, not all children have the same aptitudes. Belgrade has a program in its infancy. It's called Panther Trades. It works with tradespeople in the community, businesses and such, and gives kids an opportunity to go out and get real life skills prior to graduation. How do you feel in your position about these programs and getting, you know, them, you know, credits and accreditation and stuff? Getting the students, you know, actual credits towards graduation and also promoting skills and the trades in general.
Oh, Brian, that is a home run. And I thank you for the service that you've done, but the service that you're going to do, because your heart's in it. I can see into your home. I see family behind you. You're going to put the families of Belgrade first, as well as those children. Thank you. Number one, does it matter where students learn? No. If they are learning in an atmosphere that is not in a shop class, but it's in an automotive training center, or it's just down the road, shouldn't that learning have value? And that learning could be equivalent to a graduation credit or requirement that might be in a brick or mortar school. We've got to think outside this traditional school box. So I have a great opportunity called Montana Ready. It's a public-private partnership where I talk to private industries and I make sure that when those students are there, of course, they're in a safe environment. They're in a learning environment. And then more importantly, those students can be recognized back at the school with their classroom teachers and the trustees as yourself, that there is good education, great education that's happening in a private sector setting. That's a business. What a great opportunity for our high school students. What I would like you to grow, so I'm going to give you some homework, Brian, is to grow this in the middle school with an awareness. Get those kids that we know that when they're in that stage of life, something's happening to either the family, to the grandparent, some economic challenge or change is occurring, and those kids are biologically changing. If we can focus on middle school, more enrollment will occur at that high school level, more engagement, more important than just kids sitting in their seats will occur, and there will be more attainment after graduation. So you're spot on. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Elsie. I got another question that popped up during that from Taylor. Go ahead, Taylor.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, Miss Arntzen, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for being so willing to jump on here and take the time to answer our questions. My name's Taylor, and I'm a mother of two small kids. One of them is in public school, but I did homeschool her up to halfway through third grade, and we decided to put her in a little country school just to try it out. And that was after lots of thorough investigation and talks with the principal there and everything. You know, I've heard a little bit about teachers unions, and specifically for the state of Montana. And a lot of it has predominantly been that they are far left wing and very much have their hand in a lot of what these teachers are able to teach in schools and stuff. I'm wondering if you could better inform us about what your knowledge of the teachers unions is, and also how can we as private citizens and parents get more involved to kind of change and sway the direction and the trajectory of the public education system specifically right now.
Thank you, Taylor, and blessings to your family.
Thank you.
Of course. So I'm a $2 billion shop. And this is in $1 billion of every year of a legislative funding, which is a biennium. So every year I give out $1 billion. 90% of that $1 billion goes into staffing. Now, there's staffing, of course, in teachers. There's staffing of specialists, whether it's your anyone that you would like to engage. That would include your counselors, your nurses, all of that. There is also the staffing of your administrative. So it could be your superintendent, your principals, and that. And that 90% is bargained. So it's not bargained so much for the, how do I want to say this, superintendents and the principals. There is not necessarily a union in Montana. There are associations, but they are not unionized or part of a national union. They are part of a national organization. So that in our state statutes, we have really strong contract laws. The way that we became a state was because of resource development. And so when mining and everything came into our state and timber, there was a lot of union action because to protect the workers of health and safety. So right now, the dollars are what the union bargains for. Not all of our 400 school districts across our state hold a bargaining unit. So not all of them. If they're in a country school, they may not. In a larger district, I'm assuming they would, because there are more dollars on the table. A union, then, their responsibility is the bargaining and the healthcare and all the benefits that go in with that. I have found that the union in Montana is not as strong in the other components as the national unions are. In other words, our local unions, teachers' unions, don't get into the topics that national does. So they are pretty much set up just for the bargaining for the compensation that they seek. There are levels in the union in the state of Montana as well that may be a little bit more active. I was part of a teachers union when I was a 5th grade teacher in Billings for 23 years, but I was only part of the union for 7 years. There's a reason to join a union, and there's a reason to disaggregate yourself from the union. Yourself as a parent, you need to recognize that teacher should be there for the learning and to make sure that they are there for the safe environment for your child. That's your first and foremost discussion with them. If they get into these other topics that are the National Association, then you get in that classroom and you make sure that that's not what they're there for. And not only for you as a parent to talk to the teacher, please make sure that you extend that to the principal and to the superintendent. It can go all the way up to a board meeting, and then you get your 3 minutes. I don't know how many times these last 2 years I was given just 3 minutes. And in my topics and in my discussion with the school boards, you have a voice. You're the first and number one advocate for your children, and you need to be there. As busy as your life is, you need to make sure for those 7 hours that you're away from your child that you are there 100% of that time. So I don't know if I answered the question enough. There's a lot of history in contracts. Contracts is very, very deep rooted in our legislative action. If we were going to remove the union, you would have to go way in to our legal entities, and there would be a lot of ramifications. It's not about getting along just to get along, but you need to understand who it is that is teaching your child. If you realize that they are not who you want, make a request for different, or as you have done, choose elsewhere. Choose a country school or somewhere that you would like, or choose virtual, or choose any kind of a model that might be available to you with your economic reasons or to anywhere you might be in your geographic regions. But number one, it should be about the learning. That's the discussion you should have with that teacher, regardless of union or not. So Jim, you're muted.
Perfect. Needed a teacher. Brian Freese has a question, and respectfully, I've got one last one for you to be respectful of your time. So Brian, go ahead. By the way, real quick, Brian ran a very successful campaign for county commissioner here in Flathead County. Although he didn't win the spot, he certainly garnered a lot of votes, and he showed the ability to work hard. So Brian, great job, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I appreciate that encouragement. Yeah, my name is Brian Freese. I'm father of 4. My wife's kind of hiding in the background here. We have 3 kids that we homeschool. Our oldest child is actually enrolled in the local middle school. She does her work as a remote student, which we actually found to be really beneficial this year for her to be doing that, because they outsource it to a university for her to be doing her work. But my questions kind of follow what you were just talking about, and maybe in part you answered this question, and maybe not. Forgive me if I didn't quite hear the answer to what I'm asking, but as I understand it, Montana is the other thing is I'm a Montana certified science teacher. I'm secondary certified. So, and as I understand it, Montana is not a right to work state like other states. So like when I worked in public school, essentially like funds were taken out towards it's kind of pigeonholing us into joining a union.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering what, if anything, is being done to make Montana a right to work state. And then my second question, if you have time to answer it, if you don't, that's okay too. I'm really concerned about the encroachment that I've seen over the last maybe 70 years of socialism into education. And when I look at socialism, I think of it and communism as a philosophy that insists upon an atheistic form of government and an atheistic form of education, but that ultimately leads to an annihilation of religious freedom for everyone. And I'm just wondering what is being done or what can be done to roll that back to ensure religious freedom, not just for students, but for teachers and administrators and people in public service.
Brian, thank you. And hello to your wife in the background. Hello. So you've hit on some really great topics. Right to work would have to be a piece of legislation that would have to go through the legislature. We also recognize, I was a legislator for 12 years. My last session was in 15 as a state senator before I became my role here. It would have to go through legislative action, and then it would probably be tested in the courts. One of the powerful things that did happen with the Supreme Court for our nation, is that there was a decision called the Janus decision, which meant then that you did not have to join a union and that your compensation did not have to go to the union. That was a very large decision. And that was a year before the pandemic. So we're talking in 18. It came in June of 18, I do believe. That right there set the entire stage. And you know, when you hit a bee's nest, what happens? They all come out in a swarm. So since that decision, there's been very little action legislative wise, even though, and under that time, there was not a Democratic, there was a Democratic governor and there was a Republican-led legislature. So now the tables have turned a little bit because now we have the executive office, and I don't want to sound too politically here on this, but if you have an executive and you have a legislative body that all agree on the same thing, the propensity for the courts is better. Let's put it that way. In other words, you would want to make sure that there is the ability to have an opportunity for success in having the legislation be upheld in court. The other aspect that you had asked about, that was the right to work one. The other one that you had asked was, help me with that one. Which one is it again, Brian? I'm looking in the chat box.
Yeah. So it had to do with religious freedom and
thank you.
pushing back against socialism.
When it comes to those things that are taught in school, in the history component, in social studies, they went live, brand new social studies standards went live July 1. So they were a year ago then in July. We put original documents, we put Federalist Papers, we put everything that we possibly could to champion our nation, as well as the philosophical thought of who we were and how we were founded in our documents from kindergarten all the way through high school. Before, social studies was only supposed to be taught 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, and something then in high school. We made sure that social studies and original documents, history reflection, was put into every single grade. That way they couldn't tear down the monuments, they couldn't burn flags, they couldn't do things in schools because it was against the state standards. Those things have been gone live for a year. Districts have 5 years to implement. So we have a long way to go to make sure that happens. Let's talk about the other aspect of God and country. Saying the Pledge of Allegiance and really talking about what that one sentence means, because it's one sentence, and what under God means. That is said in every single one of our schools, but what had to happen last session was a bill to put into play that it was said in every single class. In class, meaning once a day in elementary, once a day in middle school, once a day in high school. If we can start saying those words and then have teachers explain what that one sentence means, then God and country can be braided back together again. It's on our currency. You're not in Bitcoin, but if you rely on what we have at the Federal Reserve, it's there. The other thing that I want to share in being bold in who we are. Last year, we held a law conference. We had 100 attendees. It's free. The law conference was all around very sticky wicket issues. Critical race theory, segregation, gender, everything last year. We're doing another one in September. And Jim, I would love to invite anybody to be able to take part in Zoom with our law conference. It'll be a day. We are talking specifically about socialism and communism this time, because we are encouraging our teachers and our school administrators to recognize the difference of where our great country is now and where we don't want it to go, because we know that there is a battleground, and the battleground is in our public schools at this time. So I'm holding on to dear life and doing everything that we can to make sure that the founding fathers' mission, the document of who we are as a great republic, is being held true. But I don't run the schools in Montana. School boards do. The most important election ever is to a school board. Any of you that would like to encourage another one to run, encourage them to cross that finish line, because running for an elected position is not easy, ever. I'm here to help. Jim's here to help. Brian's here to help. We're here because we know that it is so important. And Brian, you've been through an election. You learned a tremendous lot in your county commission election. And you're humble, and we are. But we also know that we must do better, right? So it is not necessarily, let's wait and see. It's what is it that we can do to make sure that we create a better future for all constituency. And in my world, it's about our children's future. It's about being taught about America. I held today at the Rotunda, I held a flag ceremony. And I was so excited that I got to do this. And I had about 80 people sitting in the chairs. Most importantly, I brought in the Mansfield Center. They brought 40 teachers from other continents and countries, and they just happened to be in the Capitol. And I invited them today. I gave them all American flags. And we opened with a prayer. And we opened then with the Pledge of Allegiance and honoring our great flag of our nation. And they stood and they crossed on their heart. And then afterwards, they said it was so joyous. They're here in Montana for a month. They said they will never forget this in our great People's Hall, the Rotunda at the Capitol. And these countries are not republics. Some of them are urging to do so. If I can help urge teachers in other countries become who we originally are and want to continue to be, then what great learning there has been. We must look greater than we are and have greater service than who we are. You showed that, Brian, in your election cycle. Brian Heck did in Belgrade. We have a lot of work to do, and we're not giving up.
Elsie, thank you for that. When we first spoke, it was actually the day after the school board elections about this call. And you said, don't give up, Jim, don't give up. And if you don't know that, for the rest of the group, the 76 Syndicate we had flushed through over 41 school board candidates this last cycle. And Elsie, you had a message for the ones that did run, and you also have a message for the ones that might run. And I'd love to have that as my last question to you. We have one that came through the chat if you got a moment to catch that afterwards, but I really wanted to get that message out before we had to wrap up your time.
You're so kind. You're so kind. The number one thing that I know of is that we have to be courageous. And being courageous means that you stand your ground, but you also make movement forward. If indeed there is ever is where you are pushed against or pushed backward, then you become not obstinate, but you become smarter and you understand the playing ground. You understand where you need to be. And as I had said just earlier, you cannot give up, but you're going to work smarter. You're going to be more intelligent because you've experienced. What you experience means then that you have laid the groundwork to the next move forward. Now they can write my name in any paper and they can say anything that they want. I have turned a cheek. I have been kind. I have been gracious. If I would come out angry, if I would come out frustrated, if I would come out being in a negative view, the propensity of individuals to believe that my mission is not positive, that my mission is not centered on children and families, it would be because of my anger. We can lead by being positive. And I think that, Jim, is one of the biggest missions. We must know when to say no, but how we say no is not about looting and changing what we saw in the streets of last summer and the summer before. January 6th, I don't know how many of you are watching or partaking in any of the thinking that might have happened, but it is all about believability. Believe possibly what you might, take in what you might, but in your heart, you know what's best. And we're Montanans, we're resilient. It's not that we go ahead and we say no constantly. What we do is we say yes to the correct and to the right thing. It is the mission of our children. It's the mission of our families. It's a mission of making Montana proud. So make Montana proud by standing strong.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The question that came through the chat was, are librarians non-certified allowed in their capacity as a librarian to teach students on matters like BLM or slavery or CRT? What are your thoughts on that in brief?
So I license librarians. So licensed librarians means that any discussion that I had with the Attorney General last year, so the critical race theory, when I went to the Attorney General last spring and asked him to determine what the federal laws, our state laws, anything dealing with human rights or civil liberties had any indication with critical race theory being taught, where we segregate out a certain population and we give them more or we give them less. He came back and said that it's illegal to teach that. Librarians cannot teach it. Anyone who has, counselors can't teach it. I license them as well. There is also state standards that embraces equality, not the word equity. We follow the state constitution in Title 10 on equality. So what I am looking at this point is to ensure that our teachers are professionally developed, that they recognize that what is lawful and what is not lawful. That's a big determination because I have 20,000 of them across our state. And some of them are led by social media or led by national organizations that are outside of education. If I can have our profession, I'm a teacher, be professional, then our students have nothing to fear. Our parents have nothing to fear. But to be real, public schools right now are under a barrage of so many things. It is up to the parents to say no. It is up to the parents to determine the yes. Please empower the parents because they are the ones that are the first teachers. The children go home to the families. We need to empower Montana families at this point. And in a partnership, we can do great work, and our children will not be that 34C or better. We will have 100%. So Jim, thank you so much for this great opportunity. I will give you more information on this law conference because I believe it's not just about Montana. We bring in national experts as well. And I've got some great freedom-loving individuals that are coming from think tanks across our nation that are very concerned. You know, our previous governor talked about Montana being the last best place. I'm concerned that that might be the case, but let's make it the best place for our kids to learn and our families to be proud of. Jim, thank you for this great opportunity. Everyone, blessings to you, your family. Thank you for all you do in your communities. Thank you, Jim.
Elsie, we appreciate it. And for everybody on the call, I'm committed to find more school board candidates for 2023. My open goal that I've already stated to several is that we want to raise $100,000 through my political action committee to support candidates across this state run for school board in 2023. The time is now. Don't wait till February, March of next year. The time is now. Get involved. Taylor, you asked what you can do. There's your answer. You got a dad that can show you how to do it. And Elsie, my commitment to you is that we will do that, and we will find as many candidates across the state. And I certainly appreciate all the people you introduced me to in this last year. So thank you for your time. We'll let you go. If you want to hang out for a minute, if you have any questions for Rod or I, we're happy to answer those. And I will post up any information I get on this law conference from Elsie, so it's available to you. And if you don't see it, feel free to reach out to me and ask me for that.
Thank you. And Jim, you've got my cell number. If you would post it in the chat, I have no problem. Here's an interesting thing. I was at Girls State yesterday. There were 100 young women, 17-year-olds, that are in the basement of Carroll College. And I got to visit with them for about 45 minutes. I was so impressed with our youth, our young women that we have, and they are powerful. And the most important thing that I can talk about with them is that they are going to be courageous. They're going to be that next step and be very courageous. So we've got a bright future ahead of us. And I know that as adults, we can listen to our youth and we can make a better path and a better journey for them. It's up to us to do that. So Jim, thank you again. I'm going to jump.
Yeah.
Blessings to you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Elsie. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So those still on the call as we wrap this up, you know, what a wonderful opportunity we have to connect with the leadership in this state. I mean, when you look at an elected official, she's got to be in the top 5 for the governing body of this state, and to have access to her and somebody in a leadership role that cares about our future and our kids and their education. I don't think we could be any more blessed than to be here under her leadership and what she's trying to do for our kids. And Rod and I are committed to helping school board candidates get involved. If you're on this call and you didn't win your election, please run again and run again until you get on, because that's our future. You know, 99% of all the elected officials in this state failed on their first try. All right. I'm working with John Fuller. He failed 3 times before he got elected, and now he's one of our top elected officials. So don't give up. It's our future. Rod, I know you want to tell us who our guest is next week. So if you want to make any comments and tell us about that, love to hear it.
I will. First, Mrs. Freeze, I saw you nudging Brian there. It's not over. That's right. And the rest of you, if you know somebody that you think would be a good candidate for school board, or when you're talking to someone and they're making comments, plant that seed, encourage them to run, and then plug them into us so that we can help them. We have to do this together. So real quick, what we have coming up next week is a 40-year public school educator, Jermaine Wagner from Casper, Wyoming. And she is trained with National Geographic Society Instructional Leadership, Europe Beyond Borders, the Rivers Institute, the Network of Alliance Coordinators. In addition, she participated in the Canadian Geographic Society Summer Institute for the 21st Century. She attended the Choices Institute at Brown University on Afghanistan, was a Fulbright Memorial Fund educator in Tokyo, and received the Outstanding Support for Geographic Education in Quebec, Canada. And she never joined a union. She was the outlier, but she is going to be talking to us about what she's observed in the educational system, the changes and the changes in society. And she said, can I be honest? Because she's seen some, she was in a school, just to give you a little heads up, that was one of the very first ones that was an Apple school. So every student was given an Apple computer and encouraged, literally at young ages. I think she was teaching third grade at the time. And she watched what happened as technology was introduced and other things went away. So her 40 years of public education will come into play. And again, we're lucky to have her on, and it'll be very insightful and inspiring for all of us on the call. So encourage your friends to jump on that one as well. Encourage your friends to watch this on the back end, 1776 membership. That's what we're here for. Make a difference, make a change.
Yeah,
That's it.
Thanks, Rod. I just want to close with this. Elsie said it, and I hear all of our elected officials say it. There's no greater of importance position that you can be elected for than school board, right? That's our future. Well, and by the way, I heard somebody ask the other day, I'm homeschooling my kids, or my kids are going to private school. How do I play my role? Well, still, you can get on school board. I'm on a school board in the public school because those kids are going to grow up. They're going to be in our cities. They're going to be interacting with my kids that are in private school. They're our future. And there's a lot of value in being on these school boards. And it does bring with it a lot of responsibility for our future, but it also opens a lot of doors where you can do much more as your political career progresses. As an example, you gain access to other elected officials, and you could really make a difference. So please don't discount the value of a school board. And I'm just going to ask this one request for myself. Elsie has asked me to apply for the Certified Standards and Practices Advisory Council in Helena, which is the next step up from school board. And that's where we talk about teacher certification and some of these things and keeping CRT out of the schools. So my small rural Smith Valley school board position is giving me access to a much greater role in helping fight this fight. So please take it seriously. And again, thank you for being on the call tonight. If somebody could receive value from these calls, introduce them to us. We'd appreciate the referrals. We're here to help. We're trying to make a difference. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy your evenings. Hopefully we'll see you next week.